Hockey's greatest prize and one of sport's most iconic trophies, the Stanley Cup is known all throughout. The road to winning this trophy is one of the hardest in any sport, and while we know its name and stature, we don't really think about how its name came about. While a lot of other trophies in sports are named after key figures in the sport's history, the Stanley Cup doesn't really follow that same trend. It all started on June 11th, 1888, when Lord Stanley of Preston was named to be the Governor-General of Canada by Queen Victoria. After his appointment, he took a big interest in hockey, so much so that even his sons took part in the sport. Lord Stanley felt that the teams playing at the time deserved to have something to play for, rather than just for the title of champion of their respective leagues. So, Lord Stanley went and bought a Rose Bowl which was made in Sheffield, England for a price of 10 guineas. Which is about 10.5 pounds sterling, or $48.67 at the time, which comes out to $1,357 in today's day and age. On one side of the cup, he had the words Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup engraved, and on the other side, he had From Stanley of Preston engraved, just so everyone got the message of whose cup this actually was. The intention of the Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup was to be given to the top amateur hockey team in Canada, and Lord Stanley had some rules pertaining to it since it was his. These rules included traditions that we still see today when the Stanley Cup is given to the NHL champions. Stanley wanted to ensure that the winners returned the cup after a period of time since their victory, so that the cup could be given to a different winning team. This meant that he didn't want any team to own the cup, ensuring that it remained as its own property. He also wanted to allow teams to engrave their names and years onto the cup at their own expense. It's these rules that make the Stanley Cup stand out. As in a lot of other sports, you see a new trophy get created and given over to the winning team, which they get to keep. This engraving and lack of ownership of the Stanley Cup is what makes winning it even sweeter. Because if you've won it already, you only get to ever see it over the course of that summer that you won it in. Until you win it again, that is. The Stanley Cup made its way through a bunch of challenger leagues in Canada, such as the Pacific Coast Hockey Association and the Western Canadian Hockey League, until 1947, where the keeper of the cup at the time, Cooper Smeaton, granted control of the Stanley Cup to the NHL. But before that point, from 1926 onward, only NHL teams were ever deemed worthy to play for the cup. So you could argue that the Stanley Cup was the NHL's trophy at that point as well. So the Stanley Cup was never the NHL's to begin with, as it is one of the oldest trophies out there, predating the league. And we also learned that based off the engravings on the cup, it's not officially called the Stanley Cup, at least not initially, but instead it's called the Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup. But Stanley Cup sounds way better, let's be honest. Also, just as a note, because I think this is a really cool fact to bring up, there's actually 3 Stanley Cups, not one. We have the original cup that Lord Stanley bought, which saw it being awarded from 1892 to 1970, where it is now put on display at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. And in 1963, the NHL president at the time, Clarence Campbell, decided that the original cup was too brittle to present, so the presentation cup was created. And that's the trophy that we see presented to this day. The third and final Stanley Cup is the Replica Cup, which is a replica of the Stanley Cup that only appears at the Hockey Hall of Fame when the presentation cup is out and about performing its other duties. So that covers the names and types of Stanley Cups out there. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.